Friends, thanks for taking time to listen in on a conversation Dick and I had about the 2025 Belgian and Hungarian Grand Prix. McLaren has the Constructors' Championship locked, so now it's about watching Oscar and Lando. Max and Red Bull are now in the post-Christian era. After McLaren, the pecking order seems to be circuit-specific. And the tight margins have the ability to obscure how good the teams are doing. That's where we are in the reg cycle. As you'll hear, Dick and I unpack our highlights from this month's races and where we believe the teams and drivers are heading into a much-needed summer break. But before we get to our conversation, I need to ask, can you help us out? If you haven't already, please take a moment to follow us and give us 5 stars on your favorite podcast app, as well as share this episode with other F1 fans. We know our growth is because of you, and the guys and I thank you. Hope you enjoy our conversation. Dick, it is the end of July. I can't even believe it's that part of the calendar.
I know.
And I feel like it's sped through. I kind of sometimes feel like I've been run over by a few cars because so much has happened since the beginning of January. And then we have had 2 races at the end of the month. We already covered the July first weekend in July in our June review just because of timing. So in some ways, I'm really glad that we only have 2 races to discuss because there's a lot that's happened.
Yep.
And I imagine that people who are actually working in Formula One feel the way that we do to 100th degree of just sheer exhaustion. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's interesting that, we had the British Grand Prix and then we had a 2 or a 3 week hiatus. And then we had Spa, followed immediately by Hungary. And now we're off until the end of August. So it's like the screwiest deal on the schedule. You would have thought that knowing that there was this gap in July, wouldn't you have run Spa like a week early and have a gap and then go to Hungary and then everybody, shut the factory down and everybody go on holiday as the rest of Europe is going on. But I guess there were other considerations on the schedule other than, the rest of the teams and the team personnel. So,
Yeah, I'm thinking you're right. And I'm wondering if that's even part of the contract that they're abiding within right now.
hmm,
And I would hope that as they're looking at Spa's placement on future calendars, that would be a consideration. It does seem like each year they're trying to make it more realistic of how we can
yep,
manage a 24 race year.
yep,
So you would hope that there are other people saying what you're saying who are part of the decision making process,
right.
and that Spa would understand. But I wonder if also weather components and all the other things. Who knows? But yeah, it kind of feels like a stop start thing. But I'm glad
Hmm.
that we do have a few weeks before we come back. Not that I don't love Formula One. Like, it's literally the exhaustion in me that's speaking. I could watch it all day, every day, but
Sure,
on that note, let's get to our highlights for each of these races, and then we can talk about the analysis portion of this
sure.
month. Ready? Do you want to
Yep.
go first on the highlight, or you want me to go first?
I'll let you do Spa first and then I'll do my for Hungary. How's that?
Okay, that sounds fair. Okay, so for me, my highlight for Spa was actually stuff that happened off the track and not on the track. And I kind of
Hmm.
talked about this a bit on my race notes for Spa, is that the procedure and the process of rain delay decision making was a highlight, but not in a good way. It just
Hmm.
really irked me, made me puzzled for such a technically advanced sport. And we're celebrating 75 years of the sport, like all these different aspects. I
Right.
just would have expected something so obvious as rain at Spa to not
Right.
be an issue. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that was an unfortunate highlight. The
Yeah.
other side of it is what I loved was while we're waiting for them to make the decision, the camera panning to all the people who were in attendance at Spa and just the celebratory aspect. Now, granted, much of it was people in the grandstands for Max, but my sense, and I would say to anybody listening, if they haven't taken the time to listen to the episode of the race notes that one of our friends from the community, Troy, sent us that I read out loud for him, it sounds like it was really across the board. Everyone was enjoying the race despite the rain. And I love that for something like a classic track like Spa. And one of the reasons that I think that it should continue to have a place on the calendar, for me, it's one of the many things that makes me want to be a Formula One fan, is that
Hmm.
environment of people enjoying the spectacle of the
Right.
race.
Yeah. I mean, I got to hand it to the fans. They were there having a party and they really didn't care that it was raining. A big tip of the hat. It reminded me a little bit of what happened at the U.S. Grand Prix at Coda a few years ago when a tropical storm came in and just deluged Circuit of the Americas. And you know what? A lot of the fans still stayed there and hung out and all that. And I think the race wound up running the next day or something. But it was absolutely one of those deals. Same kind of deal, right? Except I think there were, no, I don't think, I know there were more fans there in Belgium getting wet and not caring about it. But of course, they're probably used to getting rained on in Belgium and here in Texas, not as much. So, yeah.
Okay, so then what about Budapest? What's your highlight?
Well, first of all, I'll say that my highlight for Spa, this is why I let you go first, is that sarcastically speaking, I'm amazed that I stayed awake through the whole race because it was a snoozer. So that being said, Budapest, I really liked the fact that there were so many different strategies running and those strategies were based on what happened even as early as the start, the first lap of the race. And teams were already switching into the mode of, do we roll the dice? And I mean, we saw that with Lando, right? He blew the start, got passed by a number of cars by the end of the first lap, and they were already thinking, can we make this work on a one stopper? And they did. But what was so cool about it was is that all these strategies were thrown out on the table. People were stuck with strategies that were based on their relative position or their competition's position. And at the end of the day, the two strategies pretty much dovetailed to everybody. Rarely do you see that. And I thought that that was really cool. I mean, like Helmut Marko after the race said, hey, if Max had been able to run a one-stop strategy, he would have finished two positions higher, probably, you know. And of course, at a place like Budapest, which is so hard to pass, it's not Monaco, but it's pretty close. Strategy is the only thing that's really going to allow you to leapfrog the opposition. And so I thought it was a fascinating race. It didn't have a lot of on-track action, but it sure impressed me with the strategy and the fact that Lando was under enormous pressure from Oscar because Lando had old tires that were worn out and Oscar didn't, and he pulled it off. And it had to have been a huge confidence boost for him. So anyway, that was my highlight.
I like how you pointed out the strategic aspect of Budapest. Did you see how I didn't respond to the whole snooze fest of Spa? Uh,
I know. I was hoping for at least a snort. I didn't even get that.
Well, I will say I actually inadvertently forgot to give you the floor to give me your highlight, but I actually found Spa super intriguing. So when I listened to your race notes, I kind of chuckled. I thought, yeah, we had very different experiences
Yeah,
watching Spa, but that's the beauty of it, right? Like we can
right.
have different fans who can see the same thing and come away with different takeaways. So I thought it was fantastic that we had a
Yeah.
differing of opinion. Going to Budapest though, the strategic, yeah. I think that that's where I would encourage anybody who's new to the sport to realize that when it comes to these types of tracks where overtaking, which seems like more and more of the races because of so many other factors, but the value of deepening your knowledge and trying to understand more of the strategic decision making helps you to appreciate when you don't see that overtaking. And so it's like a seasoned person like you that says, the dovetailing aspect or the different calculations. It's so vital to have people like that in your circle of people who help you to understand the sport. That's why I hope our podcast helps people to think like that and to appreciate that aspect of the sport. Because otherwise, if you think that it's only in those races where the overtaking isn't happening, but there is a lot of strategic decision making that's happening, you overlook that and you miss some valuable joy that comes out of watching the
Hmm.
race. Yeah,
Yep.
because I know when they said like, "Hey, the tires are projected to fall off," and then you waited for that lap and you saw some were and some weren't, you were like, "Okay, so some stuff's gonna start happening," or who's going, or like
Hmm.
when who was it who when in the undercut, it was the undercut from what Piastri to Leclerc. Those were
Hmm.
all things that if you don't if you're not aware, you don't understand the significance.
Right.
So I'm glad that you brought that up. Well, on the Leclerc, my highlight was Charles this week, but it wasn't so it was the unexpected pole position
Hmm.
and his noteworthy effort to win the race. And as I
Yep.
told you before we started the recording, I do acknowledge that the pole position really kind of is an anomaly because of the variable circumstances that happened during qualifying, which
Hmm.
though is similar to things like Monaco, where if you have a great qualifying session, it puts you in a fantastic position and you could have a great, wonderful race and or race win. And I think in the case of Charles, it's unfortunate that the machine didn't cooperate with everything else that had happened to put him
Right.
at that point. It wasn't the lack of his execution or skill. It really
Right.
seems, based off of what we know as of today's recording, it was an equipment issue, which is
Right.
sad. And
Yeah.
but we've seen that happen in places like Monaco or what is it? Saudi Arabia is also like that, right? Where
Hmm.
it's difficult to overtake. So again, another valuable, in my opinion, for people who may not understand why all these tracks have significance and why we enjoy watching different tracks is because they're different challenges.
Hmm.
And knowing that helps you to realize that this was possibly, I was listening to something that said that this is possibly the one place that Charles could have possibly pulled out a win at this point. And that's kind of got to be hard for anybody to hear that moving forward, which you may have opinions about that as we get into the analysis of teams. But it seems like if I were Charles or anybody else and you just don't know that you're going to get a win, how do you keep motivated? How do you not lose, your mental stamina?
Right.
That's just a question I would
Right.
have.
For sure. Those are really fair questions. And, I think the short answer is that, those guys are pros and they have certainly had their lean seasons and they've had their really good seasons. I mean, if you think about Max, he's got to be feeling really defeated, given that it's obvious he is not going to be the world driving champion this year. And again, it's the old saying that our friend Dave always says, fast cars make fast drivers. And,
Hmm.
there's no question Max is super fast, but he's got a car that just is no match for the McLaren. So guess what? Max is nowhere. And that's
Hmm.
pretty much the way Formula One has always been.
Well, on the other end of the spectrum, about a car that's nowhere and that is now somewhere better than where they were, let's talk about some of the teams and the drivers. Kick Sauber. Who would have
Hmm.
thought at the beginning of the season we'd be looking at the Sauber's drivers either in the top 10 or thereabouts? I
Yeah,
mean, I don't, that goes to the improvement the team has been doing, how like the strategic decision making. I really love that it seems like Gabriel is settling into Formula One, and I really
certainly
love that
is.
for him, right? And
Yep.
it's especially going back to Helmut Marko, his statements at the early part of the season about him. I remember I was slightly offended for Gabriel because we don't know all the all that he has done, and clearly Sauber and even going back to Fernando as a part of his management, they all see something in him. And
Yep.
so I think you said this early in the season that Gabriel, by being under the radar, has the ability to kind of dig in and embed himself. And I think that that's what we're seeing.
Exactly.
He's eased in, he's becoming acclimated. And for
Yep.
me, I'm very impressed that these last 2 weeks, I can see why someone like Fernando is believing in him and even the banter. Like, and in that sense, I see a similarity between Gabriel and Fernando. They're aging like fine wine. Gabriel's just a newer bottle, while
Hmm.
Fernando's been aging for 40 something years. And
Right.
then
44.
on, yeah, 44. Oh, he's not that old. I know he's old in the world of Formula One, but he's very young still.
Yep.
Nico on the other side of the garage is also doing very well. And these last two races, I wondered if we would see a major drop off, after the high of
Hmm.
being on the podium. But he's still battling and he's still doing really good in the sense of if we measure where they started the year. Are
Yeah.
they number one? No. But could they continue this upward trajectory if they pace it right and they burn, they don't try to just flame up really high, but just keep being consistent? I think they should feel really good going into the summer. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they've had three straight races in a row where they've scored very useful points. And, you know, at this stage of the game, they are the surprise of the year for me. Other than Red Bull sacking Christian Horner, I mean, man, Sauber's done a great job. I think they can absolutely hold their head high. And regarding Gabriel, of all the rookies, and we've got a big rookie crop this year, right? Of all the rookies, he actually had the best opportunity because, like you were mentioning, he was on a team that nobody saw getting good as the season went on. And so everybody thought, well, he's going to go out and pound around in about 17th or 18th place, and we're not going to see much from him. He's just going to get miles. And the only guy he has to race is, his teammate. And no, actually, as the car has gotten better, he's actually racing people now. So pretty interesting. For the longest time, he hung yesterday with Fernando in Hungary. And Fernando eventually pulled out, I think, about 4 seconds on him. But there for a while, I was sitting there thinking, going, well, I don't know. The apprentice may be passing the master here.
Yeah. Well, I have it in my race notes. It was at one point Fernando, Gabriel, and Max.
Yeah.
And I just was so impressed by that. I kept
Yeah.
thinking, Gabriel's pulling this out in what is a car that we would never have thought would be there. He
Right.
is a rookie, and you've got multi-world champions in cars that are actually not really optimal by any
Hmm.
stretch of the imagination.
Right.
And he's in the mix of that. I felt like a very generational talent moment that I kept thinking, could this be a forecast of where Gabriel could be in just a very short period of time if the
Right.
car continues to improve
Right. Oh,
because he's
yeah.
showing his talent.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. So then going to talent, the clear, talented drivers with matched with fantastic car, McLaren, Lando, Oscar. It's clear that the constructors is in the bag. To me, it seems like we're just going to be watching these two challenging one another. And that I think you had a great point before we started recording that for new fans, this is going to be an interesting differential than for those of us who've been watching for quite some time. Do you want to share that?
Yeah. What's interesting is that you know, everybody is used to Max going and dominating everything, including his teammate. And the teammate, because the car has been notoriously difficult to drive, it's been the Max show. The teammate might win a race or two, but really not all that many. And so I have been watching this with real interest because I think it's been a while since you've had two teammates challenging each other for the win, in the drivers' championship. And so that's kind of a new deal. I mean, I was trying to think about it because before we had Max dominating 4 years in a row, we had Lewis, and really, if you think about it, he had a challenge from Nico Rosberg in the mid 20 teens, call it. But when he had Valtteri Bottas, there never was really like the thought that Valtteri was going to challenge for the championship. It was like he knew he was the number two. He was there to pick up the pieces when Lewis had a problem. Whereas in this case, McLaren has made it real clear. Lando and Oscar, as long as you don't crash each other, we don't care who wins. And so they're going for it. So it's a very different kind of deal.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see now because I think we got a little taste of it in Budapest of how the team is willing to adjust the papaya rules to allow them to race and how much they're going to step in. Like it made me think of parents who have like two kids. In my mind, it's actually two boys who are wrestling with each other, and they're like, yeah, they just need to wrestle it out. And they're willing to
Hmm.
get in. I'm not saying a brother and sister couldn't do it. It's unusual for two sisters unless you're like cat fighting. So I guess there's a
Hmm.
little bit of a stereotype that I'm playing into, but you know what I'm saying. Like two
Yep.
brothers, they just want to wrestle. You know that they've just got to get that energy out. They've got to exert that dominance with one another. And as long as they don't destroy the furniture and they don't break any limbs, you're like, fine, just go do it.
Yep.
Get it out of your system and then let the one who wins come out of it feeling good and then the next day they may do it all over again. And
Exactly.
I that's how I felt as I was watching it as they now that they're assured of their place as a constructor and the financial benefits that comes from that and all the other stuff that's going to come from that. I can see the value of allowing those two. And I said this in my race notes as well. I think that for Lando and Oscar, this is the year they have to go at it and do it well because
Hmm.
I don't know that this alignment of car, team, and their skill will all come together like this ever again. Where for both of them, that window may be closing because who knows whether or not McLaren will be able to adapt to the new regs
Yep.
and will they be, will they have the mental fortitude to do that? So I'm
Hmm.
really intrigued to see where that may go. Now, on that note, before we go to the rest of them, you made a point to me before we started recording that after McLaren, the pecking order, I thought it was a really great insight that our audience should hear. Do you want to share that as well?
Yeah, in my mind, the pecking order isn't clear because it seems to be very circuit specific. McLaren's fast everywhere, but sometimes, as we saw this last weekend, Ferrari's really quick. Other times, when the weather is cool, Mercedes is really quick. While Max has his doubts about winning another race this year, I would argue, yeah, but if it rains or something like that, I could see Max going and bagging a win. So I think it's going to be up and down as to what the pecking order is. It's almost like, what weekend are we at? Oh, okay. Well, then this must be Mercedes' turn. Like if Mercedes were to go and win in Vegas because it's a night race, it's cool, it's easier on the Mercedes tires, blah, blah, blah. They did it last year. Could they do it again this year? Yeah, I think so. I really think so. I just don't see a clear, maybe Ferrari is number two in the pecking order, but I'm not 100% convinced. We'll see. We'll see.
So, just a clarification when you mean pecking order, you mean of how the grid will sit for the actual race, like quali.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, good. Because I was thinking when you said this, you meant the standings. And so I want to make sure that the audience and I were both clear on that. Okay, yeah.
Well, fair enough. I mean, because think about it this way. If you have enough races in the second half of the season, I realize we've just started the second half of the season, but after the break, let's say
Mhm.
you have a bunch of races where the temperatures are suddenly cooler than expected. Does that
Mhm.
mean that suddenly Mercedes comes alive and they score more useful points than Ferrari does? And so they wind up second in the Constructors' Championship? That could be. I don't know. I mean, or maybe, by some miracle, one of the other teams suddenly lands on a setup window that really works very well on tracks with medium and high speed corners. And so suddenly at places like Monza, maybe suddenly they start being a more competitive proposition and nobody except McLaren can knock them off. I mean, I don't know. I just think that from second place on down, I think that we're going to see a lot of movement as the season goes on, and it really just who's able to score enough points because it's
Hmm.
fairly close after McLaren, you know. So,
Well, I guess I see Mercedes and Ferrari jostling for P2, and I
oh,
don't see Red
yep,
Bull finding any way to get up to P2. I
yeah,
don't think that,
I think that's fair at this
yeah,
stage. Yeah.
yeah. But I think you're right that could one of those two, Mercedes or Ferrari, clinch that P2 because of the factors you just listed? Yeah, I think that it's, and especially with them going reverting back to their pre-Imola suspension and it seeming to bring confidence in Budapest. And plus, you add in now the mental aspect for George not having to worry about 2026 at least it feels
Hmm.
like it.
Yep.
That's got to make him feel good. And if they continue to manage what was clearly emotionally very difficult for Kimmy at Spa, and in my opinion, they really need to just, and I heard Nico Rosberg say this after Spa, and I agreed with him, which is they just need to remove a lot of the extras and responsibilities that have been placed onto Kimmy. And like he noted, you remember like his school came to Imola and all this pressure, this kid, he's
Right.
young enough already. And then you add on this stuff and like the TV show and all that. I understand why they need to do it. But at this point, if you want him to be able to rise up and become the next Max Verstappen, that's where I think they need to take a page out of the Red Bull book and really just hyper focus him to feel comfortable and confident in that car for the rest of the season. You've got someone like Valtteri, you've got someone like George who are more than happy and capable to manage the public out facing responsibilities
Hmm.
and have confidence in, like in the case of George, have the has proven that if you give him a good car, he can do the work. So
Yep.
take the load off of the new kid and let him just get acclimated. That's where I think he's actually the opposite of what Gabriel had.
He is a
Gabriel was
complete opposite.
right, like
Yeah,
the
for
complete
sure.
end of the spectrum. And that's
Yep.
so much pressure. And we already know that, like, the youth aspect of it, let alone the stuff that had happened when you did the free practice at what was it, Monza last year and crash. I look at him and I go, you do have potential, but it just needs to be managed very delicately. He's
Yep.
not Max in that sense. The mental Viking is what I think of when I think of Max.
Hmm.
Kimmy is strong. It's just a different personification of strength. And if they
Yeah.
can manage that, I think he can really come out. But all that to say is that if they can do that and their car is figured out, then they've got the lock on P2 without a
Right.
doubt in my mind.
Right.
Ferrari on the other side, I sit there and I go, it seems like one of your key players right now is questioning his own ability and his own role inside the car.
Yep.
I hope you guys are going to, now that you've locked in Fred Vasseur, you had an amazing pit stop at Budapest. Keep consistently doing that. Charles has to feel good about at least getting the pole and managing the race that he knew that if I got ahead of those McLarens and it was the car that collapsed on him, not his skill,
Yep.
well, that's got to feel good going in. So just manage those elements. If they got it together, I could see them dominating. So in that sense, I agree with you. Like the pecking order, everything else after them, though, I do think it's gonna. It I this is why when you say it's all circuit specific, I have to agree with you on a lot
Yep.
of that because
Yep.
the rest of them are just they're modifying and adjusting within certain narrow parameters, I think. I don't
Right.
think anybody's doing anything major. So,
No.
okay, I talked a lot. Sorry, but
No, I agree. I agree with everything you say. And again, I think, I saw a comment. Lewis was very cryptic after the race. He said, I want to be really clear. I still love racing. I still want to do this. He goes, and so basically what he was intimating was, I'm just really disappointed in myself. And I don't know why it's so hard. Why am I so far off on my teammates' pace? He's not used to that. Let's face it.
Yeah, well, and I think that goes back to as much as I was happy for Charles, I do think it was the circumstances that
Hmm.
gave him that pole advantage. And I think, especially in the immediate aftermath, where someone like Lewis, of all people, who is not accustomed to not performing or outperforming his teammate, that had to be a shock to the system in
Oh
an
yeah.
already shocked system, right? Because like
Yep.
he's had to adjust from somewhere where he is absolutely comfortable
Hmm.
and the clearly identified team leader and go into the Ferrari Italian culture from British German culture. He has to be really trying to orient himself in a way that's got to be uncomfortable
Right.
to a high level for someone who has always grown into his positions. He's now having to kind of do a major shock. I can understand that in my own way of changing from one professional world to another. It's hard because you know who you were in your previous place, but you
Right.
don't know where you are here, but you know your inner capability and you hope that that continues to transfer. And
Yep.
you have to just continue, you have to have good people around you, like i.e. you and John around you who say, we see that in you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I hope Lewis has that. I believe he has to have that. At least in Fred Vasseur. That was also something that made me happy to see that Ferrari decided to have him stay.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that would have made no sense whatsoever.
I agree with you. Other than it seems like everyone always wants to Monday morning quarterback when it comes to Ferrari inside the Italian press. It just didn't make any sense to me as an American sitting here going, why?
Yeah.
Just
Well, sometimes I think Ferrari's motto is if it doesn't make sense, just do it. So anyway,
we apologize to Italians who are listening, but we're kind of not also apologetic. We're coming at it from our American perspective.
nope.
Okay, so moving on to Red Bull. Max. I have a lot of thoughts on his situation, and in some way, I may come across negative, so I'm going to refrain of really giving all my thoughts. And if anything, I would say people should listen to the Hungarian Grand Prix race notes and determine from there what I think about where things stand for Max. I'm just hoping that this break gives him time to spend with his recently expanded family and that he realizes now that he must lead Red Bull in a way that I don't know that he's ever done before. And I do think it's interesting that he has chosen to stay at Red Bull. I
Hmm.
wonder if he has watched Lewis's transfer to Ferrari and seen it as a cautionary tale of leaving somewhere that you were embedded in for something that seems like it could be really good for you. I don't know. And again, I kind of highlighted this in my race notes a little bit, and if people want to hear
Hmm.
more about it, I'd be happy to expand upon it. But the other thing I was going to say, is it just me? Or does it seem like Max and Yuki are totally two separate garages? I say this because I realize that the second driver component of how they operate at Red Bull, but I look at Oscar and Lando and they are two garages now, but it feels like with Max and Yuki, there's just like extreme differentials. And
Hmm.
that has to mess with Yuki's head as it has with every other person that's been in that seat. And you would think that Red Bull, and I'm really thinking about like the corporate management, i.e., there's
Hmm.
no longer a Christian Horner, but and Laurent Mekies, I would be concerned about that because ultimately you need to be at the top, if not the champion, to get the financial benefits you
Hmm.
want as a team. So wouldn't you need to make sure that Yuki is also feeling supported? And if anything, during this break, getting him into a better headspace. If not, they're essentially going to be relegated to P4. And that's a
Hmm.
hard position to be dug out either in the middle of this season or next season when you look at it from an operational as well as financial standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple of thoughts along those lines. First of all, they've had four championships winning seasons in a row, right? And that means that even though I mean, I realize they didn't win the Constructors' Championship last year, but they won the World Driving Championship four times in a row. They've been either first or second in the constructors through Max's sheer force of will, because as Sergio's performance started tailing off, Max more than picked up the slack, right? And so what that meant was, to me, it meant a couple of things. Number one, they've had 4 years in a row where every single year, because of where they finished, they lost wind tunnel time compared to the other teams. And so, whatever technological advantage, this is my working theory, whatever technological advantage they may have had in the first year of ground effect or the second year of ground effect, they began eroding it, right? As other teams figured out how to narrow that gap. And now, what they have is a car that is in such a position that it is not good enough that Max's brilliance can make up for its shortcomings. Because we saw that last year. It was not the best car, but Max absolutely drove the snot out of it. Let's put it that way. I think that that's part of it. I think the second part is that for years now, and we've seen it with Gasly and Albon and Sergio, and certainly Yuki and Liam Lawson, they have been so focused on Max and so, I'm going to use the word kind of complacent. It's almost like, well, we got Max, you know. The chickens are now coming home to roost, because clearly nobody can drive that car except Max. And now it's to the point where Max is sort of like, I ain't happy with this car. It ain't very good. And I think, some of that, of course, losing Adrian Newey and so much other talent, that's got to be catching up to them, the lack of wind tunnel time. And then again, the fact that they've produced a car that is super difficult to drive. And so the chickens are coming home to roost. And honestly, I mean, okay, everybody's talking about the new regs coming out, but if they don't have a very good engine and a very good chassis, aero again is going to be a big deal, right? Because Formula One is all about competitive aerodynamics. I think they're going to struggle if they're not careful. So that's my 2 cents.
I agree, which is why I am absolutely befuddled as to the decision to let go of Christian Horner.
Yeah, it
Like
makes no
it
sense.
makes no sense to me because I mean, I actually have a high level of respect for Laurent Mekies. I
Yeah,
liked
sure.
it when he came over to Racing Bulls, his pedigree inside the sport. I thought he was doing a really good job. And I even heard that when he was approached to say, you're coming over, he was like asking them to reconsider. I think that he understands. And I said this in my episode where I kind of tried to unpack this, but so many key decision points are already crossed when it comes to the new power unit that they're developing on
Hmm.
their own, right?
Hmm.
In the critical time period to let go of someone so integral, I mean, the captain of your ship
Right.
makes no sense to me. While when you then couple that with everything you just said about how many, like you put all these eggs in this one basket and you're handing this basket over. Before you had someone who was trying to delicately balance it. Now you've handed it off to someone who doesn't have all that same experience and relational capital, and you're hoping that they don't, and they are probably hoping that they don't either drop all of those and crack all those eggs either. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, it does in my mind. It all goes back to Didi Matishit's death and the succession war that has probably been waging. But I feel sorry for them because I see more challenges than I do see opportunities. And I
Hmm.
kind of talk about this in my race notes. I just hope that Max realizes the level of responsibility he's going to need to carry, that
Right.
maybe he did not have to and did not realize that was actually the burden was carried by Christian and others in the team that
Right.
have now departed.
Yep.
And it'll be very easy to start casting blame at others while instead
Hmm.
realizing that you've reoriented, like if you've moved pieces on the chessboard, you have to acknowledge then you've also changed the game, like the
Right.
strategy. So it'll be again, I'm not trying to be negative and say that Max is a bad person or anything like that. I'm looking at it like from a more political business perspective. I think Max seems to be happy and loving to his family, all those different things. Like, I say all that because I don't want to, my heart is never to be negative about any of the drivers
Right, right,
because
right.
they're doing
For
something
sure.
really good. All right, that's as far as I want to go on that, if that's okay.
For
Okay.
sure.
Okay, so let's move on to Williams, Carlos, and Alex.
Hmm.
Okay, they didn't have that great of races this month,
They had a tough month.
right? I was
Yep.
really, what's the word? Uncomfortable, saddened. But then I told myself going into the second half of the season, I think they just need to hold on. Neither one
Hmm.
of them was painted a picture that this is going to be an easy year. And I recently listened to Alex on the Beyond the Grid podcast, with Tom Clarkson, which I'm
Hmm.
such a huge fangirl of Tom Clarkson. And I came away thinking both Alex and Carlos have been underrated and they're bringing their best. And I think Williams is really blessed, fortunate, whatever word you want to have them there. And they just all need to keep doing the work. And
Yep.
I watched this short documentary recently that was on Damon Hill and his transition to the Arrows team
Hmm.
and how so many people after he won the championship with Williams and then had no seat, how they all kind of underestimated him. And then he
Yeah.
went to Arrows, which was not really good on at the time and like what reliability issues galore.
Yep.
And instead he just stuck at it and it was like, don't overlook. I kept thinking, don't overlook the people that are on the downswing, either as a team or an organization, because that's actually the people that can come up when you're not expecting it. And it just was very interesting to think that this might be them coming forward, even though it feels like they've taken a few steps back this season. So that was one. The other was I didn't have time to research this, but I watched this video of some content creator, so it could be totally wrong for all I know. But they noted that Williams has a relationship with Porsche and that Porsche has a high level of success elsewhere in other motorsport disciplines that gives them understanding of hybrid technologies that how do I say this clearly? Because you're the technical person, you'd probably be able to correct me if I'm wrong. And that because they have done such excellent work in those other places, they really understand it with the new regs leaning in higher into the hybrid components. It will benefit Williams even more with a deeper collaboration because of the insights that they would gain from the Porsche's success and advantages. And I thought, well, if true, that's very interesting. And what if that is part of this rehabilitation plan for Williams? Is couple that with the Mercedes trying to figure out by going back to their pre-Imola. It seems like these teams are really going back in and saying, what do we know for sure works? And
Right.
let's try to eliminate the things we know do not work and let's
Hmm.
go lean into our strengths. Does that make sense
Hmm.
what I'm saying? Or I'm
Sure.
kind of talking out loud.
Sometimes you got to take a step back to go two steps forward, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's like Belgium. I mean, it was such an anomaly because of the weather and all that kind of stuff. But I actually expected Williams to be really quick at Belgium because they've got a car that's known for being really quick in a straight line, And so, man, if there ever was a track with, lots of high speed, you would think Belgium would be a place where Williams would do well. Yeah, they struggled, and Silverstone to a certain degree, I mean, so I don't know. I do believe that you're right. They've just got to kind of keep their heads down and just keep working, And so I hope they do. Maybe they'll get it together. Now, as far as the Porsche deal is concerned, that's interesting. I don't know exactly how that relationship works, or if it's even true, because sometimes people will say stuff and, you don't necessarily get the opportunity to fact check it. But it's interesting to me because, Williams is using a Mercedes engine. They're going to be on Mercedes again next year. Pretty sure those engines and the batteries and everything are all sealed. So what would happen then is that Porsche's expertise in how the electric energy is harvested and when it's released could be beneficial. But as far as any demon tweaks to the actual hardware itself, I don't see that happening. I think that that would be contravention to the lease agreement that Williams has with Mercedes. That's my take.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. I should have fact checked it, but like I said, I didn't have
Sure.
time. It was an intriguing proposition to me of what, because there is apparently some existing relationship between the two companies. Whether or not how far would it deepen was the question, and then could what they're learning elsewhere. But yeah, I do find the Mercedes element aspect of it. It seems like even if there was Porsche, like somehow they had insights that would help. Would they really want to help if all the credit goes to the Mercedes for their engine? Like it
Oh,
just
that's a
seemed,
great point.
yeah,
Yeah.
it just kind of seemed a little odd. But then I
Yep.
thought, well, I don't know enough to know if that couldn't
Hmm.
be true. So that's why I pose it. So if I'm totally wrong, anybody's willing, I'm happy to be corrected, you
Yep.
or any of our listeners. Okay.
Absolutely.
So do you have anything else you want to add on to the Williams aspect?
The only other thing that struck me is maybe their Porsche deal. Porsche's got a wind tunnel that's superior to the one that Williams has.
Oh, yeah. Well, I could believe that based
Yeah.
off of what they said about their infrastructure.
Right.
Everybody seems to be better than Williams in infrastructure, so they'd
Right.
probably be very happy to take that. Okay, so we talked a little bit about Ferrari. I'm
Yep.
looking over my notes. I feel like I've said most of my stuff. Do you have anything else you want to add on the Ferrari side?
Yeah, no, I really don't. And Lewis, I think maybe I mentioned it earlier, but he made the comment today that, or after the race, to not misconstrue his comments about, them needing a new driver because, he still loves to drive, he still loves to race. And so I think what you saw there, I would say that's probably more the perfectionist expressing his discontent with his performance and trying to see if there's a better way to get himself back up to speed. And I think ultimately, Lewis has just not enjoyed these ground effect cars. He's never really gotten comfortable with them. I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens next year when the cars become a bit more conventional, even though I have serious misgivings about the power unit packages for next year. I think that they could be a real problem for the sport, but that's another conversation. But Lewis driving a conventional car probably is going to rejuvenate him, would be my guess.
I 100% agree with you. And I really wished we would go back to a more traditional car.
Well, you're going to get your wish.
Yeah, but I mean, even more. I mean, it can't come fast enough in my mind. I feel like there are other ways. Well, yeah, you're right. This could totally get us sidetracked, so I'm not going to go there. I have thoughts, but they're not as sophisticated or as well developed as yours because you're so much more technological than me. So I won't go any further than that. But okay. So if that's on the Ferrari and Lewis side, do you
Hmm.
want to go to their customer Haas? Any
Sure.
thoughts on them?
Well, Ollie Behrman continues to impress me. And, they've had some good performances this year. Spa and Belgium were not high on that list. But at the same time, Behrman's been pretty consistent. Ocon is, as usual, he's kind of up and down, it seems like. When he's fast, and when he's really not on his game, he's kind of so-so. And you never are really sure how much of it is the car and how much of it is him. But, next to Bortoleto, nobody had a whole lot of high expectations for Behrman simply because Haas is always kind of an unknown quantity. And Haas, they've had some really strong performances this year. It's just that the last two races really was not super strong for them. And who knows, they may show up at Zandvoort in 3 weeks' time and suddenly look like world beaters again. I mean, we just don't know.
Yeah, I feel like this month it was just tracks that didn't suit them, and so
Hmm.
hopefully they can get to some that will sooner rather than later. So the momentum that I feel
Yep.
like they've built will continue. but I don't
Yep.
disagree with anything that you've said. So then that leads us to Aston Martin and Fernando and Lance, which I know is going to make you so excited.
Yeah. I think it was before we started recording, we were talking about Aston Martin, and after the Hungarian Grand Prix, Fernando said the good news is we had good pace today. The bad news is we have no idea why. You know, they've obviously made a step forward. And again, they took a step back so they could take a step forward. They went back to the floor that they introduced at Imola and combined that with the new wing that they introduced for Belgium that also sprouted a couple of new flaps and end plates, I think it was. And the car was pretty effective. Now, is it going to be fast at a place like Monza? Doubtful, because the car has always suffered from straight line speed, but it certainly seems to have improved them. At tracks like like the Hungaro Ring, and they may go really well at Zandvoort. I don't know. There's that one long straightaway, but Hungary has got a fairly good long straightaway as well, but then everything else is pretty tight. So we'll see. Kind of interested to see what happens with those guys. They may be one of those teams where they score really useful points depending on the circuit. But I mean, my goodness, they qualified 19th and 20th in Belgium, and then they were, both cars made it to Q3 and finished in the points of the race. So, will somebody tell me which Aston Martin's going to show up this weekend?
Yeah. I would say is I wrote this in my notes. I have whiplash
That's
from
perfect.
them and the team, right?
Me
I
too.
do wonder how much of what we saw in Budapest is the same thing that we saw with the anomaly of Charles and Pole. Is
Yep.
that was it what was happening that day in quali? Did that help them? And then they both, and especially Fernando, were able to leverage everything within the car to
Right.
hold everyone at bay.
Yep.
And especially, I was really impressed by how Fernando set the pace for everybody else at
Oh yeah.
Budapest. That was so fantastic to watch.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, and even you alluded to it when it came to Gabriel and Gabriel being right there and I kept thinking, are they going to do like some kind of toe to be able to hold back Max? It seemed so fun to watch that. The other side is I just wonder, it seems like they don't have a handle on that car, much like Mercedes. And I hope that they figure these things out. They continue to do as what some of the other teams are doing of just not ticking things off that are possible reasons for why things are happening. So that way, by the end of the season, they've gotten clear understanding and that can be knowledge that can help them for 26. And of course, they have Mr. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Adrian Newey for
Hmm.
26. And that's like, I keep thinking that's going to be their savior moment for 26. The other thing I
Well,
continue, oh, go ahead.
I was going to
Sorry.
say, and don't forget the new signing from as their chief technical officer from Ferrari. He's finally off of gardening
Oh,
leave, and he
that's
actually
right.
reported to Aston Martin. I'm going to slaughter his name, but it's Enrique Cardilli, I think is how you
Yes,
pronounce it.
yes,
Yeah.
Cardeal, I think, or Deal. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, one of those two. Yeah, yeah,
There's
that'll be
that.
great if he
Hmm.
can come in and start doing more active review. That could totally change the game for them.
Exactly.
The
Exactly.
other thing, though, that I've been wondering about is Lance's hands and
Mm.
his recovery in light of a because in both cases, both of the drivers have had injuries. Lance's hand, and then Fernando, them saying he had the back issues that kept him out of FP1, and Felipe Drugovich had to come in and
Correct.
do FP1. I just
Yep.
hope that injury does not create a backwards step right when they're making the technological component.
That is a great point, actually, now that you mention it. I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I mean, where's their focus going to be? I guess that's the biggest question. So,
Well, I in that sense, I'm glad that they have the 2 weeks off. So that
yeah,
way the bodies can all hopefully have a
recover.
little bit of recovery time,
Yep.
especially when it comes to Fernando and thinking about a back. 44 years old and the wear and tear that
Hmm.
he's gone through all these years. And yes, he keeps himself to a very optimal level, but you still have a lot that you're putting your body through. So maybe he can just go find a beach and rest. I know he
Yeah,
wants to go into a cart and go race during these 2 weeks, but
that's
maybe
what I was
not.
getting ready to say. He needs to stay out of the cart for at
Yeah.
least a week, you know,
Yeah.
if he can
Yeah.
do it.
If he
I'm
can
not
do
sure
it,
he can.
right?
I'm not sure he can do it, but
Yeah.
let's see what happens.
All of you carters, you struggled not to want to get into that cart.
Oh man,
Uh,
no kidding.
so let's go to Racing Bulls, Isaac and Liam. I would say Isaac should hopefully feel really good going into summer break, considering where things. I keep coming back to that opening lap of Australia, or not even a lap, the formation lap, right? And in the heartbreak he felt. But then
Yeah.
when you now hear people asking, should he be promoted to Red Bull? Like he
Hmm.
couldn't have thought that moment when he was stepping out of that car,
Yeah, yeah.
and that people would in a few short months be saying, hey, maybe he should be Max's teammates. So I just want him to go and rest, have fun. He seems to have a good head on his shoulders of not overthinking it and not stressing himself out. And I don't want what seems to be the pressure cooker of Red Bull to get to him. I'd rather him just continue to be himself and to thrive. And I also hope that the change from Alan Permain from Laurent Mekies does not alter Isaac's momentum. Uh,
Hmm.
that really kind of concerns me because it seems like Laurent had developed a really good relationship with all these junior drivers. Someone noted that when the first race, which was Spa, when Yuki came out of FP, well, I don't remember which one, if it was one or two. Wait, they didn't have two, so it had to only been one because we had a sprint in Spa, right? That Laurent turned around and gave Yuki a thumbs up, and Yuki said that was like so encouraging to him. And it just seems like Laurent has built that good relationship with these young drivers or
Hmm.
junior drivers. I hope that Alan Permain can hold that and be that kind of leader
Yep.
so that we can see these guys thrive because Liam this week, he was the highest Red Bull car. I mean,
Yeah.
who would have thought that when he got brought back to Racing Bulls?
Right.
So I feel like I keep calling them young, but they're not really that young compared to everybody else. But these drivers need that opportunity just to not feel such pressure. I also
Hmm.
recently watched a video of Liam doing some rally racing at Goodwood. And I, as well as those people in the video who were watching, were absolutely impressed by Liam because he had never done rally racing and he was like less than a tenth off of one of the champions
Wow.
of rally racing. And it just made me really impressed by how quickly he took to that style of racing and driving. And it reminded me he has really great skills and it's really about the mental resilience. And you
Yeah.
need to just build that back up
Yep.
after the trauma of what happened at Red Bull, which he should look across the field or across the grid and look at people like Alex and Pierre who did that and they're thriving despite challenging circumstances.
Right.
So he needs to see that in himself
Yep.
and he can do this.
Well, and I think the other part too that he seems to be a pretty resilient character. I mean, I don't think you get to Formula One without being pretty resilient because it's just so hard just to get there. But I also think the other part is seeing Yuki struggle and knowing how he matched up against Yuki. It says to me that he's probably sort of like, you know what? It wasn't my driving, it was the car. Time to get on with it. It's sort of like nobody can drive it. And so, except Max. I think that's the other thing. I think, we're certainly seeing him becoming more and more the Liam that we think he is. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah, that's such a good way to say it. The Liam that we think he is.
yep,
Yeah. Yeah, I
yep.
like that. Okay, last team. Alpine,
Oh,
Pierre,
I feel so
Franco.
sorry for those guys.
Yeah, I honestly don't have much to say about them. It's kind of like how I felt at the beginning of the year with Sauber. I don't want to say anything because it's got to be rough for them. And
Yeah,
all I can hope for is they have the ability to rest, some time to
yep.
decompress, and that they come back stronger. considering everything that they're going through.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have said that, hey, it's very possible that when they get a Mercedes engine next year, that they're suddenly going to be really, really good because let's face it, Renault is leaving Formula One. That was never the strongest engine out there anyway. And now that they've left, they've certainly quit developing the engine. So that's probably a part of it, but just the sheer chaos that that team has been in for so long. They've probably got a horrible culture. They've certainly had no consistency in leadership, no consistency in technical direction. And again, this is sort of the old, the chickens have come home to roost kind of thing. It'd be interesting to see what happens for sure.
I agree. Okay, so final takeaways. Do you want to go with yours or you want me to go with mine?
Oh, I'll let you go with yours first.
Okay, so I think that when we look at the order of the teams, we kind of alluded to this earlier. Is it going to remain the way that we see them today throughout the rest of the season? I think the obvious is that McLaren, yes. I mean, they're not losing their
Right.
spot. And we did reference that Ferrari and Mercedes, for the reasons we said, could be jostling between the
Yep.
two. I don't really see Red Bull somehow challenging them, so I would imagine they're going to stay as P4. Where I see the movement is really everything from there on. Williams, Aston, Kick Sauber, Racing Bulls, Haas, each of those I think will have tracks over the second half of the season that give them leverage or opportunities to leverage their cars' characteristics.
Hmm.
Then you add in their drivers who'll hopefully have feel more settled into their cars. I'm thinking
Yep.
like the rookies or like the new team members, i.e., people like Carlos feeling more confident in the Williams, Nico feeling even better in the Sauber than he does. And then the inevitable variables like Monza, Baku, Singapore, Mexico, Brazil. These are where there will be a lot of fun to be
Hmm.
watching in the back
Hmm.
when you're not watching Oscar and Lando. And I think for teams like Ferrari and Mercedes, they'll need to really take a clinical approach to ensuring they don't have any major obstacles to maintaining their positions. Like they really need to sit down and look at the checklist of, okay, should we take this deviation? Should we do this? Or should we just go back to what we know is tried and true that maintains the comfort and confidence of our drivers and just trust their talent versus is trying to do the technical? That's
Right.
where I feel like the changes in the order will probably come. The other thing is that I think that it's easy to overlook this is that the tight margins that we're seeing have the ability to obscure how good the teams are actually doing right now. And it's
Correct.
because of where we are in the reg cycle. So
Yep.
as you're looking at their lineup in the standings, don't like I think it's very easy to go, well, they're 10th, well, or fifth, whatever it may be. But that doesn't mean that they've got a terrible car. It's just the margins are so tight that
Right.
it's putting them in fifth place. The
Yep.
other thing I would say is to anybody who's a new fan, these looking at this month's races, these two races are historic races within F1. And what we experienced this year isn't really indicative of the rich history of those tracks for a variety of reasons. Therefore, I would encourage new fans to go watch archives of old races on F1 TV and see what many of us remember or know about the sport's history at these races.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's fair. If I think about the pecking order for a second, okay, if we kind of maybe were to get a little bit on the cut it to the chase and maybe make a few predictions about what the grouping might look like. You have McLaren in first, you have Ferrari and Mercedes fighting over second. You have Red Bull probably locking in P4 unless they have some disastrous races where, Max doesn't finish a race, a few races or something like that, right? Then for P5, you got to figure it's probably going to be Williams in P5, and they're probably going to be challenged by Aston Martin. If Williams continues to struggle, right now, Aston Martin may be the hotter ticket for fifth place than Williams. That sounds a little crazy, but it might be Aston Martin, although I think they'll probably be sixth-ish. And then you kind of got to figure Racing Bulls by themselves with Kick Sauber, who started off kind of slow, but they seem to be picking up momentum, kind of battling it out with Haas, who, as we noted, is up and down all over the place. So let's see what happens there. But I could see Kick Sauber and Racing Bulls going at it. And then I just don't see Alpine coming out of anything other than 10th place. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. Is that 10 now? One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yep. Wait a minute. Oh, Haas. Haas fighting it out with Kick Sauber. So I think that's probably the pecking order. McLaren first, Ferrari and Mercedes fighting over second. Red Bull probably has a lock on fourth. Williams and Aston Martin fighting over fifth. Racing Bulls seventh. Kick Haas fighting over eighth. Alpine bringing up the rear in 10th. That's probably about right. So you see, you could come back and tell me what we have afterwards. How far off am I?
Oh no, I think you're great. You want to hear mine?
Sure.
Okay. So I definitely think we're in agreement in the McLaren, Ferrari, Merc, and Red Bull.
Yep.
That I'm with you. I actually would say I would go with Williams and Kick Sauber,
Oh,
Haas, and
for the final
race.
point standings.
Yeah, like I think these four will be kind of neck and neck within a few points of each other.
Oh,
I
wow.
actually
Okay.
think that Aston Martin, and I think that I might change my opinion when they come back to Zandvoort. If I
Yep.
think that they've gotten a handle with this new technical person, they might
Hmm.
shock me.
Yep.
But and I think that Alpine will. I'm with you in agreement at Alpine. But I feel like the Williams, Kick Sauber, Haas, and Racing Bulls are so close, and because they have either A, rookies, or B, they have individuals that have transferred over to their teams that are highly technical seasoned, like I'm thinking Carlos and Nico. I
Yep.
think in Esteban, it's just about leveraging the race itself to the advantage that their car has. And so that could put them in those points positions that aren't being occupied by the rest of them. Like, so what
Hmm.
is it? Two seats are going to be taken, or the top two positions are going to be taken by McLaren. You've got two probably from Ferrari, one at least, if not two from Mercedes, and then you've got one Red Bull. So that really only leaves you three more slots, I
Hmm.
think. And I could see each of those getting those three slots in some type of rotation depending on the circuits.
Okay.
That's kind of how I come to that.
Okay.
So I'm not
What?
really disagreeing with you. I just think that for me, I feel like they're more neck and neck, but that's probably because I'm not as technically minded as you, as seasoned
I,
as you.
yeah, I don't know. Who knows? I mean, let's pull out the dice and roll
Yeah.
it.
Well, and Williams does have a significant advantage right now, a 20
Yeah.
point lead on Aston Martin, Kick Sauber, and Racing Bulls, who are all within, I think, 7 points of each other.
Right.
So, and then Haas, they just need at least two or three races where they do better than everybody else. They're going to be up there.
Right.
That's why I kind of think. But yeah,
Right.
I feel like Aston just because they acknowledge they don't
Yeah.
know what's going on. I
Yep.
feel like this week gave them a good haul of points. Otherwise, they would be lower than what we see
Agreed.
them right now. That's why I'm
Agreed.
just like, I really think they just need to figure that technical component.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean it's for me it's sort of like all what would have to happen is Williams have another Hungarian Grand Prix and
Hmm.
Aston Martin have another Hungarian Grand Prix and suddenly it's neck and neck.
Exactly. And that's the thing. I feel like I wish more people, as they're paying attention to the race, would seek to watch that side of the track as well, that
Yeah.
side of the grid. And I
Yep.
hope that I think they did okay at the Hungarian Grand Prix, but I hope that the producers of Formula One or the broadcast team would pull out a little bit more. It was really frustrating
Mm.
at certain times because
Hmm.
you couldn't see the full track or understand like who they were zeroing in on where was that in relationship to other people on the track? Or they kept cutting during certain moments to people like in the garage. And I was like, I don't care what's going on in the garage right now.
Right.
I want to see what's happening on the track. And yes, that's so-and-so's girlfriend or mom. That's wonderful. Show that to me when nothing's happening, like,
Right. Right.
yeah. So that's the piece that I wished we could have a conversation with those people and just encourage them to remember those of us who only have that box that we're looking at need you to be giving us that
Hmm.
view that we don't get because we're not at the track itself. But
Exactly.
do you have any other takeaways that you want to share?
No, I don't think so. It should be very interesting to see how the teams come back at Zandvoort here in 3 weeks or however long it is, and maybe 4 weeks actually, and see what happens. I think it's 4 weeks. I think it's going to be absolutely fascinating to see if they come back. And I don't expect to see any development work, but I do expect to see teams refreshed and maybe ready to make the big push to the end of the season. So still a lot of races to go.
When you say no development work, do you think that they'll optimize that which they have developed moving
Yeah.
forward from this point?
Yeah, I think like when they go to Mexico City, you'll see the cars sprout some new cooling ducts for the brakes and the engine and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think you're going to see, you know, any, radical big
Hmm.
changes unless they're testing stuff for the 26 car. And even
Hmm.
then, they may not race that part. They may test it in free practice one or something
Hmm.
and see what they get.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Okay, well, I've enjoyed this. I
Yep.
know that we have some other episodes that are coming in the pipeline, but I also want to plug the series that you're doing with Derek
Mm.
on your son Derek on various motorsport films. We
Yep.
have a couple that have already released, a few more that are on their way. Thanks
Yep.
for doing that. I think that we've gotten some good feedback on that. So keep it up. And if anybody wants you to do more, they need to let us know. And if there
Sure.
are other topics people want us to cover, they need to let us know. But other than that, I feel like we're in a good position for summer break, and we're really grateful for all the people that have been listening. I know I want to say this to a lot of people that are new. We've seen a high growth in the last few weeks and months, and we're really glad to welcome new people into this community.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as the movies are concerned, we are going to be doing a review of a very, well, somewhat obscure movie called One. I don't know when Sabrina's planning on dropping it, but we'll be recording it tonight. Derek and I really enjoyed this movie, and I hope that comes through in our review. So I'll leave it at that. Interesting movie.
I love it. It's so good. Summer movie season.
Oh,
That's what
yeah,
it is.
that's what it
Awesome.
is.
Awesome. Well, okay, Dick, thanks so much. And I look forward to our next conversation.
Me too. Thanks, Sabrina.
Okay, friends, what did you think of our conversation? Drop me a line via email, Sabrina at 2guysagirlandf1.com. Can you help us out? If you haven't already, please take a moment to follow us and give us 5 stars on your favorite podcast app, as well as share this episode with other F1 fans. We know our growth is because of you, and the guys and I thank you. And with that, let me say, we'll keep talking and you can keep listening in because we're just 2 guys, a girl, and F1. For John, Dick, and me, Sabrina, thanks for listening.